I'm a senior product manager at PayPal. I want to thank you all for taking time out of your busy, busy days to come and spend with me over here. And I really want to thank Product School for giving me the opportunity to share anything that I've learned over the last decade, and also to learn from your experiences and conversations that we'll have for the next hour. I tend to speak a little fast, so please feel free to stop me in case you want to double click on something that I just uttered. So briefly, the agenda for today, we'll talk a little bit about my background, just so there's context in some of the stories that I narrate. We'll talk a little bit about what product managers do, because as I could gather, a lot of us are new to product management or looking to move into product management. And then we'll talk about how do we use data to actually make intelligent product decisions. And if you have some time, we'll spend maybe a few minutes just to talk about good skills for interviewing for product management jobs, or if you're looking to hire product managers, these are some sort of structure that you can look through when you're sort of hiring your candidates. And then we'll have some Q&A. So a little bit about me. Like I mentioned, I'm a senior product manager at PayPal. I manage our real-time enterprise decision-making platform. So we essentially provide risk and compliance decision capabilities to all of our PayPal customers. This is based on data science and machine learning models. I moved to the States about 11 years ago. I'm from India, and I did my engineering, as so many of us do, coming from India. I came to Carnegie Mellon to do my master's in computer science. And then I started my first job at Microsoft as a developer. Over the last 10 years, I've worked in multiple domains, starting with databases, middleware, networking, which is hardcore C++ coding in transport layer. I worked on 4G LTE mobile gateway protocols. Eventually I moved into storage, and I moved into Hitachi Data Systems, where I started my first product management gig. And that was where I sort of got a real taste of incubating a small startup into a large company and really taking a product from concept to revenue. We grew our team from 5 to 30 engineers. So what my product really did was we were working on providing a visualization platform for police officers to do real-time decisioning based on things that are happening around them. So when they get a 911 call, what information can you arm your first responder with so that he actually makes a good decision? That is there bloodshed? Were there witnesses? Did someone tweet about it? Was there a partial license plate capture? Is it a terrorist? So this is called situational awareness, and I'll walk through some of the examples about how we went about creating that product, considering I don't know anything about policing. So walk you through what our journey was. And as part of that, and actually, the one good thing about it was also a brand new initiative for Hitachi, because Hitachi is a storage company, Hitachi Data Systems. It was their first stake in the ground for their IoT initiative in the space of video intelligence and public safety. So a lot of learnings and a lot of mistakes along the way, but it was all in good, good spirit. Aside from that, I also moonlight as a fashion, travel, lifestyle blogger. I have about 170,000 followers on Instagram. The reason I bring this up is because a lot of my growth has been purely based on data. I use data and analytics to constantly monitor where I'm getting engagement from, what customers are actually reciprocating with my posts, what time zones, what locations, what type of content resonates with what kind of folks, and also use some of those examples to walk us through how, if you have a platform, a blog, or just a product like Facebook and so on, how do you actually monitor your success based on some of your engagement metrics. Aside from that, I live in San Jose with my 2 rescued puppies. That's one of them. And my husband's here with me for the support. So thank you. Okay, so like I mentioned, feel free to stop me if you have any questions. So, product managers. Have you ever encountered the situation where somehow, all of the time, you expect the product manager to have all of the answers? And do you think that's the right way? Okay, let me ask another question. How many of you work in teams that are very engineering driven? And that means a lot of your roadmap, a lot of your features are driven by engineering specific mindset. I see some hands. Great. And how many of you work on teams where a lot of your decisions are purely driven by a product manager? Wonderful. So I personally have worked on both kinds of teams, and I personally consider the two of these as extremes. And I'll tell you why. There's this whole notion about your product manager is the CEO of your product. How many of you really agree with that? I see some heads nodding. I personally do not really love that statement, because as a CEO or as a product manager, you have all the responsibility of a CEO and none of the authority of a CEO, right? So I feel like it's a really ambitious statement to like get your journey started out. So some reality checks here. Realistically, what you have as a product manager is you have a goal, build your product. You need to come up with a plan to drive your entire team along to actually meet that goal. You have some success criteria that you are evaluated on, that your product is evaluated on, and your team is evaluated on. And the sad part about it is a lot of times product managers have very little information about what you're going to encounter along the way, right? You can have changing timelines, you can have dependencies go aside, you can also not even expect that some hypothesis that you began with totally may not work out, right? So how do you actually ensure that you are actually set up for success so that these obstacles don't come in the way of your team moving forward? Personally, for me, the whole journey of people, process, product starts with people. So it really what I really emphasize on is pay attention to the people that you recruit along with you on this journey, right? Think about an uphill climb top of Yosemite, right? Now, you really don't know what obstacles you're going to encounter along the way. However, if you recruit the right people who give you different perspectives, in our case, you think about engineering, of course, right? They are your racehorse. They're the ones who are going to really feet on the ground, they're going to get you moving forward. But what about UX? What about someone who's giving you that perspective and keeping you real about what the experience needs to be, what really matters to the end user, right? What about architecture? So that you're making sure that your implementations are not hacks. They actually are industry standards. They are scalable. Your product is robust. It's going to survive through, fault tolerant and all of these things, right? So you need someone who is, from an architectural perspective, giving you the right advice. And then the last, in my opinion, is program management. They really keep you grounded when it comes to your sprints, your dependencies, your commitments, your timelines. So personally, for me, the whole journey starts with the people that you surround yourself with. So as a product manager, your first goal is actually empowering your team, creating a safe environment so that every single one of these people who has a role in your team has the ability to express themselves, right? So you create the safe environment so you're not making decisions alone. So now that you set out a plan and you start working down that journey, you measure your progress based on the KPIs you set out. You're going to meet obstacles, obviously, but every single one of these people is going to help you make a sound decision, and you collectively move forward, right? You recalibrate your plan and you move forward as you go along till you hit the end of the line. Okay, so how many of you heard about the Lean Startup by Eric Ries? Awesome, I'm so glad. If you haven't, please take some time out of your Sundays, instead of going to a bar, spend a little bit of time to just read a little bit from this book. It's really a Bible for any of us who are on the product management journey. It's not the only Bible, but it's Bible enough for me. So what the Lean Startup book really advocates for is the build, measure, learn method. And this is really inspired by Toyota's lean manufacturing methodology. So what this really talks about, and we'll walk through some of these segments, and I don't want to get into the weeds of it, because I'm sure a lot of you already know about it, but the whole customer first method, right? The idea behind this is to, before you determine what to build, you need to know who you're building this for, right? So discovery, as many teams call it, or Lean Startup as they call it, this is basically where your sense and sees comes into play. These are the different phases. So going through detailed discovery process to really learn about who your customer is, what are their problems, seriously develop empathy for those problems so that when you come up with solutions for them, you really get into the head of the customer and you can solve it, right? So I'm going to quickly switch gears to a little bit about discovery. I'm going to give an example of what we did in my previous job. So discovery can really be of two types, and I recommend both types, quantitative and qualitative. So quantitative is where you're sort of reaching out to the masses. You're trying to get themes about what are possible problems out there. Who are the different customer segments that are relating to me, to my product in a positive way? Who is not? So the way you're actually going to get that information or data is send out surveys. Have different kind of questions that are more pointed but not leading, so that you get a clear, and there's tons of survey tools out there that will give you very clear insights in terms of women within the age group of so-and-so from this location respond positively to my product. Men, so-and-so. There's clear ways to actually draw these kind of insights, and that will give you a good starting point to get to the next phase of your discovery, which is qualitative. Now you identify focus groups as to areas where you think you need to focus on and get to the next level of detail, right? And that's where your qualitative, or what we call interviews, come into play. So interviews are very tricky. You do not want to go with leading questions. You don't want to go with, oh, do you not like the XYZ feature of my product? No. What do you think about the XYZ feature about my product? Non-leading, right? I'll give you an example of what we had to do. So like I mentioned, my product was a situational awareness tool for first responders. So the way this plays out typically is we get a sales call, a salesperson gets us a request saying, this is a feature you guys need to go off and build. There's me. I've never ever, and I will never venture into the policing force because I just don't have it in me. My developers, no freaking idea. But we are going to come up with a tool that's going to help solve and fight crime. Sounds crazy, right? So the only way you actually get to do this is by learning, by talking, and sort of going through the day of a police officer's life. So, and this is what they kind of walked us through. So we walked through different segments of police departments. Some large, so they have larger budgets, they're dealing with high crime. Some of them are more tech savvy, some of them not so much. Some of them were really remote, and things like that. And one common pattern that seemed to arrive from all of them was, I get a 911 call, right? Someone says, gunshot. I need to go and dispatch my paramedics, my first responders, and so on to arrive at the crime scene. How much information does this first responder really know? Was there a terrorist? Was it a hit and run? Was there someone who actually saw a witness, right? So we're like, well, we have all of these solutions. We can partner with gunshot companies, we can partner with license plate reader companies, and so on. They're like, yeah, we already have all that. That's not my problem. But my problem is when I get that call, how much time do you think I have? I'm going to log into one camera to see what's going on right there. I'm going to log into some gunshot detection system, see where the gunshot came from. No. They wanted a single pane of glass, pretty much like a Google map. This is how they described it to us. They want a Google map. So when you actually have a view of all the assets that you own, cameras, gunshot sensors, license plate readers, facial recognition cameras, and so on. And you click on a pin, instead of seeing a street view, you get to see a live view of what's going on. And let's say someone tweeted saying, I saw a suspect. He bolted off in a car wearing a black hoodie. This is a license plate I was able to capture, throw in a picture. I should have access to that. So how do you deal with this, right? Now we actually have a starting point. We at least know where to get started. There were a lot of random requests aside from this. So some people we want all of social media incorporated. We want some drone detection software and things like that incorporated. Now those are one-offs and they are great, but what you're trying to really arrive at is your MVP. MVP comes from what do you hear that's common across your customers that will make them buy your product. They have to pay money for you to actually get to the next level. And this is what came across as common, right? So this is what we went off and did some interviews, came up with some mock-ups, went back to these groups. So it's not just about coming up with one MVP. So when you come to the build phase of your product, right, you go through milestones. You come up with, let's say, just clickable mock-ups. Take it back to these user groups and see how they're interacting with a clickable mock-up. You haven't even invested resources in it. See how they're reacting to it. And as you advance through these milestones, you validate with the KPIs that you set out, am I getting closer? Am I getting closer to what this customer will pay for, right? And that's basically what the build phase is. And then, as I mentioned, once you roll your product out, you measure, and we'll talk a lot about measuring today, what kind of KPIs you can use for engagement, conversion, and so on. But the most important part of all of this is learn. So as and when you basically walk through a release, learn from the mistakes. You start out with some hypotheses. I think that in this police department, I will have 80% engagement. I see 2%. Now, you know it's 2%, but how do you deep dive? How do you get to the next level? How many times are you going to go back to that customer and ask them, why didn't you click on this? You can't do that. You need data. You need instrumentation that'll give you these clues as to where you need to begin your investigation. So data plays the most critical role in actually getting you to the next level. Okay, so I spoke about consumer-facing products, right? What I do at PayPal, and I want to briefly touch upon this, is some of you may be in consumer-facing roles, and a lot of times we hear product management examples talking about consumer-facing products. But there's so many of us in the industry that are actually on back-end systems. We're working on platform, and that's a whole other beast. So at PayPal, what we do is I'm part of the risk platform team. So this is different in the sense there are nuances as to how I have to enable my internal customers who are really consuming APIs of my platform to generate value for that end user, right? So the difference is you have to think about my KPIs are very closely tied to my internal customers' KPIs, which internally ties to, let's say, this is what my engagement rate was. And what's interesting about risk is we don't manage revenue. We are the bad news folks. We basically manage losses, right? So it's a very interesting empathy building sort of dynamic where risk product managers have to be a little bit more careful about so that you're not letting our risk bias. Like we are basically the paranoid freaks, right? We're like, no, you cannot do this because I could possibly be a fraudster. He's trying to hack your system. But I have to constantly draw that balance between declines versus user experience. Every time you go to France or Italy and you try to swipe your ATM card, how many times do you get declined? Most times you do. That's your fraud algorithms kicking in. And that's great. And you'll actually hear from PayPal, in fact, you will never have heard a story saying that PayPal got hacked and all of your financial information was leaked. Never. And the reason behind that is because of our super advanced machine learning algorithms that are constant, and our data scientists. There's a whole group that's actually working day in and night just to make sure that that doesn't happen to any of you folks. However, that's not easy. Because as a risk product manager, I have to balance between not declining you every time you log into PayPal because you're not going to come back to PayPal then, versus if you get hacked, that's it, you're never going to come back to PayPal, right? So it's a fine balance that you need to draw. And I just want to throw it out there because I like this challenge. I know people think about product management as primarily with consumer-facing products. And having been on that side of the house, this is a whole other beast. And I feel like I want to throw this out there in case you guys are interested. This is a little bit more challenging than you would think. Anyway, that being said, my journey is the same. My customers are a little bit removed from the external customer. It's internal customers like who are developing APIs on top of my product. So I have to be conscious about making sure my product is generic. So my APIs, my product is an API, and we live in an API-centric world, right? Everybody's producing APIs for open sourcing and so on. So I need to make sure that if a merchant team brings me a requirement saying that you guys need to really up your fraud detection algorithms because, I don't know, you're just, I'm seeing a lot of losses. Versus the consumer team or the Venmo team comes and tells me that, guys, like you're totally screwing my experience. Like I'm losing engagement. And the whole thing about Venmo is we are doubling our engagement every quarter and so on. I need to make sure that the features I release satisfy everybody. So you have to consciously make that balance. And this is where people ask me, are you a technical PM? Are you a non-technical PM? There is actually some value in thinking about that question. Because when you are a technical PM, you have to make those sound judgments, right? You can't just make this based on business goals or just customer goals, but these are also platform goals that you need to think about. Anyway, so I'll quickly touch upon that before I move on. Getting into the crux of why we are here today, data. So what questions can data answer for you, right? This is really about talking about what KPIs matter to you and how do these KPIs help you make decisions. So when you're talking about conversions, there are many methods to actually determine where you are actually going to lose customers. Because the biggest thing about conversion is, let's talk about, how do you measure conversion? If you have N customers come to your product, how many of them bought the product, right? Or something as simple as how many people actually you sent out an email saying, hey, sign up for Facebook. How many people actually went ahead, filled in their email address, filled in these X things, hit sign up, and actually went through. So you want to be able to see out of, let's say, 100 users, did 50% of them drop out? Where did that 50% come from, right? You want to see where you're losing people so you can start focusing on them, right? So this, we'll walk through something called as funnel analysis, which will actually help you determine where the churn is happening, where you're losing your users from the system, and what helps them sort of convert across. The second thing I want to talk about is user engagement. So what feature is driving your engagement, right? You'll often tell, like today PayPal actually had their earnings call and they talked about engagement has been better than ever, and they threw out a percentage. How did they get that number, right? So companies like Facebook, LinkedIn, I do this for my blog all the time. I'm constantly measuring how many users are new versus how many of them are return users. How many of them are coming back to see my blog, because retention is a very important metric. Something also as simple as in my previous product, right, where I had, we called it HVS, Hitachi Visualization Suite. We were actually noticing things like people log in for 5 minutes, log out. As though there's no crime happening in the city, right? But that's not true. How do I get to the bottom of that? Is it because cameras were not streaming? Is it just that they were not even able to log in? But data was telling me that they're just not logging in and spending time on the sessions were really short. But that gives me a pointer as to where can I begin clicking, right? And like I said, retention is probably one of the biggest metrics any of us will actually think about. Building great products is great, right? Getting people to sign up for that first experience is wonderful. But either your experience was really terrible, so people left, or something that you did basically did not delight the customer, right? So how did we measure retention? Things like subscription renewals, like I mentioned, return users. Now, you need to get to the bottom of this. How do you do that? Think about the last thing that the user did before they churned out of your system. In my case, let's say I had these cameras that I put out on Google Maps where they click, right? And most times when my users logging in, it's because there's a crime that occurred. So they're clicking on something to actually immediately take an action. Now, data can tell me that how many times do I see a camera streaming error? Now I know that the reason someone left my system is because my freaking product did not stream the damn camera, right? So, and that's really bad for me because I am actually coming the way of solving crime, which is my whole value prop. So things like these will actually help you get to the next level. I want to talk about behavior because this comes a little bit more into play when you think about marketing. So let's say you have PayPal introduces credit cards. And you have multiple marketing campaigns, Facebook, Google Ads, email, whatnot. How do you know what's really effective? So understanding what channels is really driving engagement will actually tell you, what your user behavior is. And then you can go ahead and dissect it. Another way to look at it is segments. So like I mentioned, we actually targeted different kinds of segments. And we'll talk about some of those things as we move along. Are you thinking about the size of the police station, which means that comes with its own nuances? Are you thinking about location of the police station, which could mean bandwidth issues and storage, servers being overloaded and things like that, right? All of that. And lastly, the most important thing of it all is ROI. For the investment you're putting in, how quickly are you going to turn profitable? All of these metrics have to help you answer that one question, because that's what your execs are looking at, right? So think about that. So here are 5 simple techniques that I have used in my process, and we'll walk through each of these. Funnel analysis, I'm sure you've heard of all of these terms: funnel analysis, cohort analysis, segmentation, event-based tracking, and click-throughs. I'm going to click next. So funnel analysis is really about determining churn at each stage. I'll walk you through a simple example over here. Let's say you have a workflow. This is most applicable when there's a workflow that you're analyzing, right? You have a workflow like sign up for an account or download and install this app or something. That's something that is a multi-step process. So this will kind of help you determine what percentage of users are completing what steps, right? So let's say you're launching, I don't know, some app in a new country. Let's say you're launching PayPal in a new country, hypothetically. You've run some marketing campaigns, you've got a whole bunch of users that have decided to begin the sign-up process. Now, as you walk through, you basically put in your email address, you get an email into your email account saying, click on this link to verify that this is really your email. Then you go back, and now you have a profile, but you need to complete the profile. To complete the profile, you add a credit card or a bank account. Once you do that, there's verification that happens, and now you have an active account. So this is a multi-step process that a product manager who's responsible for signups would be actually thinking about. You want to have, and you can see, obviously not everybody who starts the journey completes the journey. But how do you get to pick up on the folks who you've lost, right, along the way? So you think about hypotheses along this. Think about, why did people not even make it to this stage? Is it because I'm offering really limited capabilities? Is it because I'm letting you add a card, but I'm not letting you send money to your friends and family? Maybe it's limitation capabilities. Could it be that there are competitors in that market that I haven't thought about that are offering better capabilities? Could it be brand awareness? Nobody knows who the heck PayPal is. And so now these are some hypotheses that you've come up with. And now you need to actually use the next steps that we'll talk about to actually analyze which one of these is true so that you can take action on it. I'm going to give you an example of what I do for my, I'm not allowed to share PayPal data, so I'm going to walk you through how we can use funnel analysis for my blog, for example. So if you notice, we'll see a lot of folks coming in. This gives you some sort of segmentation in terms of the country. And you can see a lot of people are coming into my landing page, which is my home page. But close to 50% of them are dropping off. Now, I can think of hypotheses saying either my landing page sucks, and it's just not attractive enough, and there's just terrible content. Or there could be other things, like it just takes too long to load the page, right? People are not able to get through to the next level. But we can see that 50% of them, about 50% of them are actually moving on to do their first interaction. You can see, I don't know if you guys can really tell, but looks like a bunch of folks who are coming to my page want to know who the heck I am, which means something about my landing page was interesting enough to them, right? And then they go on straight away to travel. They're interested in my travel content. Even from here, if they come to my landing page, a good bunch of them come to my travel pages, which means it gives me insights to say that most of my customers are actually relating to my travel content or about who I am, right? And from travel, it seems like they have a good enough experience to go and learn a little bit more about me and check out some of the other things. Let's talk about fashion. Nobody seems to give a shit. People just like drop off, right? But that's what the data tells me. So now what kind of hypothesis can I draw out of this? Either my about and my travel content is pretty solid and people want to know more, and my fashion content is pathetic, so nobody wants to know about my fashion content. Or, if I really disagree with that statement, it could be that maybe the page load time for these are different. Maybe the kind of images that I upload for fashion, they're very heavy. So it's ruining the user experience. This is a hypothesis that I'm putting out, right? So let's test it out. Now, this is just an example. So I use Google Analytics heavily, so this is a good testing grounds for you guys. Just create a simple website so you get comfortable with what and how these analytics work. Because when you go into your actual jobs, I'm sure your companies have proprietary tools that actually help you to walk through all of this, but this gives you a first-person hands-on experience in terms of how you can use this data, right? So it tells you very clearly what your drop-off is and so on. So now let's see. As I mentioned, most of the people are coming in to check out my homepage, and the next bunch of them are coming to check out travel, and then a few more to see about me and so on. Let's talk about page load time. Oops. We can see that a lot of people that are coming in to see my starting homepage, 18 freaking seconds. I wouldn't wait that long. I would move on. But some soldiers hang on and they try to get to my travel. And you can see my travel load time, 6 seconds. You can already tell why they have a better experience. Let's get to fashion, 40 seconds. I don't think anyone actually sat through that. So you can already see how data is helping you test your hypothesis, right? So simple mechanisms that you can use to actually get to some level of conclusion. Let's dive a little bit deeper. Cohort analysis. This is very critical. So cohorts is really a mechanism of sort of, you have this entire user set. Now you know that there's a whole bunch of users that's coming to your account. How do you dissect that to study more about them? Because not everybody from the United States is feeling the same way about my account, right? So cohorts are really a concept of grouping users into subsets based on some common characteristic. One way of doing that is let's analyze all the users that came to my account for the first time and compare the behavior of how did they come back to my account and interact with it. Let's take another point in time, let's say January versus February. All the users that came in February, how many times did they come back to check out my account? This is because as you're rolling out releases, people roll out releases every week, every month. This is a good way for you to test for the exact same characteristic, which is first-time users, what is the experience like? Now, let's say that I went ahead and put some really cool content in Jan and Feb and saw that my engagement went up, but I did some seriously terrible, huge images coming into my account on my landing page, and I see in March that my retention has gone down. How do I actually analyze this? Right? Because I don't want biases in terms of people who already come to my account and compare their behavior. I want the first-time experience. This is where cohorts come into play. So how you want to use this is as you're rolling out features, compare KPIs. So first, think about KPI. Most commonly, the KPIs that people think about when it comes to cohorts is retention rates. So it could either be conversions or retentions. That is, are they buying your product? Are they becoming a paying customer? Or are they just coming back to your product itself, right? Then you'll know what cohorts are driving or what features are driving what KPIs. Let's try and do this. So ignore the numbers, but what is interesting is I'm just trying to see in April, of all of the users that came to my account for the first time, 3% of them came back the next month. And then half of them came back the month after, and even less the month after that. In May, it seems like I was able to slightly increase my engagement or my retention, and then it dropped off again significantly. And then June was pretty pathetic. Kind of makes sense, because in April, I can't really remember what it was, but it was a mix of content. But in May, I went to Bali, and all of my posts on my landing page were about Bali. So I can see why engagement went up to an extent. June, only fashion. So, and it's true. You can go and check it out. And you can see how I'm trying to correlate between what the content was, what features really drove people away, right? I can take this further. So I'm going to move on to segmentation now. Now that you've broken down, you've gotten some idea, some of your hypothesis has been proven, how do you get to the next level? Because I don't know if you guys have heard about this concept of 5 whys. It's about don't, exactly. So you don't stop at, oh, I know what it is, it's just fashion. Why? Why are people not responding to fashion? Is it just page load time? Why is the page load time so low, right? Break it down further. So now, when you're thinking about segmentation, it's really about slicing and dicing this cohort based on further characteristics, such as, device used. We all know that for mobile phones, your bandwidth is an issue, right? It could be that your mobile experience is a lot worse than your desktop experience. Hypothesis, we need to go ahead and prove it, but that's a thought. It could be other things. It could be based on demographics. It could be that maybe I had an ad campaign for my blog in January or whatever. In April, I did this on Snapchat. Snapchat has a lot of young users. Maybe they reciprocate with my content. Maybe in June, I had a campaign that was advertising primarily on LinkedIn. Nobody's looking for my fashion blog on LinkedIn. So these kind of things, right? But this is ways to test out how you're actually running your campaigns and so on. So one example of what I tried to do was break it down further. My hypothesis was that I think the experience on mobile is pretty terrible. And you can actually prove that. So this is another way of doing cohort analysis by breaking it down by segment. So I added the segment of the device used. So you can see in April, out of the 6 users that came back to my account, nobody came back through mobile. But about 6 of them came back through my tablet and desktop. In May, I had 13 users come back, of which just 1 of them came through mobile, 12 through tablet and desktop. Likewise in June, right? What does this tell you? The mobile experience is worse, right? So now if I actually want to prove this, here you go. Page load time in average is 17, but for tablet and desktop it's 13 seconds, but mobile is 21 seconds, right? So this clearly tells you, this is how you actually come up with a hypothesis, use data, and things as simple as Google Analytics. You can just click on it, run it for about a week, and you already have data to play with. So this is an example of what we walked through. Other ways of segmenting, and these are just some examples I'm giving you from Google Analytics, but feel free to go back to your companies and see what tools you guys have for experimentation. And you can actually see we have segmenting by age, gender, location, and whatnot, right? So this is gender, this is by location. So if I really want to get into the weeds of it, which I should, considering I'm having some pretty weak numbers, you can sort of see where my new session's coming from, what's my bounce rate, is it that France is seeing a really high bounce rate, and maybe I need to double click and think about why is that the case, right? This is probably the most important one that I would really recommend you all do, because this is probably what companies do the least. Event-based tracking. This is kind of where you're getting into the head of the customer. So what this is really trying to get you to do is literally analyze every single interaction that a user is having with your browser or your screen without clicks and so on. The only way you're going to get to do this is actually by implementing instrumentation. So your engineers need to think about this from the time they're designing their product. And it's actually a very painful process, because you're not just developing code and getting some cool feature rolled out, you're adding a whole bunch of instrumentation. But remember this, if you have to do this post-launch, it's a very expensive process, and you've already lost a lot of really valuable data, and you're not being a good product manager. So what event-based tracking helps you do is, it kind of helps you, how many times did you see a message on the screen? AJAX calls. How many times was an image loaded? How many times did an error message take place? Or how many characters did someone type, right? So I'll give you an example of this. A lot of times, I'm sure a lot of you have seen this whole address lookup. Like, you start typing a few characters and the whole address gets filled up. Let's say you're the product manager of that feature, right? What are the KPIs you're going to be thinking about? Or what are the KPIs that you want to optimize for? Number of characters a person had to type until the right address showed up, right? And over time, you want to see that this KPI stays strong. That is, the number of characters keeps going down, which means your algorithm is getting better, right? Or how many times did you see the message or the error message, address not found? So as long as those errors are going down, you know that your feature is being successful. This helps you ensure that you have a really, really good user experience, right? So you want to think about, does the user have to type the entire address? Do they have to type all the way up to the zip code? That's not good. So in general, the only way you're going to be able to do this, literally for every character that's typed, that's in this case. Think about someone who's basically, responsible for thinking about is this ad campaign worth sending out to you guys? People may not even click on it, but some people may actually just spend some screen time looking at it, right? How do you actually think about those kind of scenarios? So you want to have built in your instrumentation, thinking about what the customer is doing and how you want to sort of instrument for it. And it's not always easy to do, to be honest. Some of these are pretty hard. I work with some of our personalization teams. A lot of these things have technological challenges, and you have to think about it from the start, from the get-go of how you put together, what technologies do you use, what does your stack comprise of before you actually go ahead and develop the project. Lastly, I'm going to talk about click-through. Click-through, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about. This is an age-old technique. Marketing campaigns use this a lot. But this is also something that you can use it's very useful for all of us to get to the next level of how can I optimize an experience. I'll give you an example. Let's say a lot of times these days, you're signing up for an account and you'll be like, I want to verify it through enter your phone number. They're going to send you a verification code. You need to enter the verification code, and your phone number is confirmed, right? And a lot of people are doing this. PayPal's doing it a lot as well. Now, how many times do you actually see? Now, if you are the product manager for that, you're going to see how many users who signed up for this experience actually clicked on get code. How many of them clicked not now? Which means your feature is clearly not important enough. They don't think that there's enough value in confirming their phone number. Which means you really need to think about what your strategy was. Who are you targeting, right? Let's say people clicked on get code. You have a good number of people who clicked on get code. How many of them had to click on resend code? Which means they either never got the code, or by the time you sent the code to them or they received it, they've moved on. You've lost the attention of the user, right? And that's a pretty terrible experience, because you will lose. There's a significant churn you'll actually notice there. So now if you think about it, you can tie this together with that initial funnel analysis that we were thinking about. You saw churn, but you can tie it together with, if you have steps along the way, you can tie it together with maybe this is why people actually moved on, right? So these are some really simple techniques that we use. You can use all of them. You can use a combination of them to just make better product decisions as you go along. I'm going to briefly touch about A/B testing because no product manager should ever leave a forum without talking about A/B testing. Make sure that every single feature that you release, there is some amount of A/B testing that is done, whether you're a platform team or a consumer-facing team. Work with your companies. A lot of these companies actually have some really great experimentation platforms. You all know what A/B testing is, right? It's great. So essentially, you want to make sure that before you release a feature, whether you should have 8 links on a drop-down menu or 3 links on a drop-down menu. How do you know? How do you know people are scrolling to the 8th link? Do a test on it. Run an experiment on it. It can be things as simple as that, but these actually go a long way. Things like, should you have on your home screen, should you have a marketing campaign over there or a, send message to a friend thing over there. Sorry, I've just been talking a lot. But essentially, do not release any feature without doing significant or satisfactory A/B testing on it. So now that I hope a lot of this was helpful for all of you folks, how can you get started? Very simple, very simple. For any of the products that you're working on, think about this. Whether you're an engineer, especially if you're an engineer and you're looking to move into product management, right? The way you want to pitch your story to an interviewer or to anyone that you're talking to is start by who's your customer. Don't talk about what you're doing right now because you're already getting to solutioning. First, talk about who's your customer. What are their problems? What is the value of the thing that you're building? Then you talk about how you're solving that problem. And then don't forget to mention KPIs because that will help you discuss how effective your solution is. Got it? Awesome. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. Or we can jump into some interview questions, which is actually going to be a working session, so we're just going to discuss it. Sounds good? The reason I put in PM interview tips is because PM interviewing is such a harrowing experience. It's not fun. Once you have the job, it's a lot of fun. But going through the process, it's a little hard because with engineering, a lot of times, you know of a good algorithm. You've seen some of these solutions. You've seen these problems have been solved. Typical interview questions. I'm not saying hard problems. But with PM, design a product. You could have so many ways to design a product. How do you make sure that you're able to convince the interviewer that this is a great solution, right? One really important thing to keep in mind is as an interviewer, I'm actually not looking, or a good interviewer is really not looking for the right solution. There is no right solution. You guys know there's no right solution unless you actually go out and test it, right? What we're really looking for is structure, your thought process. Are you thinking like a product manager, right? Let's take an example. Pick a product. I don't know, anything that you guys have in mind. A phone, not an existing product, but like a product that you would want to build. Phone, fridge, sorry?
Flying car.
Sorry?
Flying car.
Flying car, excellent. You guys are going to help me solve this now. Here's a simple structure that I recommend when you go to an interview and you say, a lot of times interviewers will actually tell you, you pick a product that you want to design. Pick your favorite product, right? Flying cars. I would recommend walking through this structure. It really helps paint a good story. And you'll see, I haven't even gotten to solutioning. But this paints a good structure and will help you get to an actual solution. Let's start with who are the users of this flying car. Any guesses?
The commuters.
Sorry? Commuters, great. Further? Rich people. Great. What else? Give me one more.
People commute from San Francisco to Oakland.
Excellent. And that's great. Because what you're really talking about when I talk about a product, I'm not just saying, because everybody can be a user of a flying car. But when you are developing a product, you're designing a product, you're designing it for a certain segment, right? So you're talking about commuters because this tells you about what their job and outcome is. You're talking about their income, so that means that will actually help you guide your pricing, right? You're talking about location. because you think that San Francisco to San Jose is probably the hardest commute, right? So now you already have scoped your problem in terms of which specific user segment you're going to solve this problem for, right? What problems do they have? This group that we spoke about, well, clearly money is not a problem. So what problems do they have? Time. Excellent. So you're trying to optimize for their commute time. How do you validate that? Data, right? Come up with, you have to think about how long does it typically, and you have to make some guesses. These are some analytical guesses that you have to make. Maybe it takes an hour for people to make it to work and back. So you want to optimize for half of that. And again, you want to, these are assumptions that you make and you walk through as you actually develop a product, you prove it based on data. Okay, now let's think about what's the competition and what's your market opportunity. By market opportunity, I mean, is this a big enough market for you to actually play in? Because sometimes you're really playing in a niche and it's hard to justify the success criteria, right? And that's fine. It depends on really what you're going for, what goals you have. Let's talk about your competition. Who's your competition? Uber? Okay. Modes of transport that already exist, basically. What about Ubers and Lyft? Because if the problem that you're solving for is you don't want to drive, or you don't want to have to drive on the road, think about it. There's no right answer over here, but you want to think about when you're coming up with the competition, where are they playing a role that, or where are they not playing a role that you can actually enter? Because the next question that you're going to answer is where's the gap? If you already have cars, you already have trains, you already have planes which are flying, where can you play a role in your product, right? I know, you can think about this, we don't have to solve it right here, but that's kind of a way that you want to structure it. Once you identify the gap could be that there's no plane that takes me from San Jose to San Francisco, right? I want this to be within an affordability of people like us, people actually who commute to offices, who don't sit in their homes and you know, don't have to work ever. So you're already identifying the gap that exists in the market, and then you come up with the KPIs. How am I going to measure success? That is, how many people are buying my product? How useful is this product? Has it really reduced my time to commute by 30 minutes, by 20 minutes, whatever, right? Now you can go ahead and solution your car. Because actually nobody cares about what that car is right now until you've actually answered all of these questions. Got it? Let's walk through another exercise. How do you measure product success? Let's pick a different product this time. Someone. Let's pick an existing product. Instagram. Excellent. What is the goal of the product? Louder. Okay. Showcase pictures. What else? Personal blogs.
I love your blog.
Sorry? Connecting people. Excellent. Now that you've settled on, we need to think about maybe a more crisp goal for Instagram. And today I think Instagram actually caters to many different users, so there's different value propositions for different audiences. However, when you pick a goal, you want to determine, based on that goal, you want to determine success criteria. One of the most common success criteria that would be, especially for something like Instagram, is user acquisition. So user acquisition could be things like either, if they already have 2 billion users, do they want to grow this to 3 billion users, right? Could it be revenue growth, right? They may have a huge customer base, but they're actually converting revenue. Monthly active users, and this is, we know, something that Instagram and all of these social media channels actually do track. Aside from just acquiring users, how much time are these users spending? Now you need to think about KPIs for this, because you can have people who are spending 5 minutes on Instagram in a month versus spending 25 minutes a day. And those qualify as more engaged users. So you want to try and bring the five times or 5 minutes a month onto this, right? So you're coming up with a goal to target, and then you kind of bring them across. That's why answering this question is really important. You can also break this down by demographics. It could be that I have great engagement from users in the States, but from India or maybe Brazil, I don't. So then your goal can be that I'm targeting user acquisition from these locations or of this age group. Why did Instagram introduce stories? to target the age group that's a Snapchat age group, right? So things like that. Another thing to think about is conversion. How many people are paying for your product? A lot of times we used to do free POCs because people are not willing to trust the product that I was putting out there because I'm supposed to solve crime. They're not going to just pay money and say, yeah, you got it. They wanted to test it out. So we used to do a lot of free POCs, and now we want to see how many of those are converting into subscriptions. Or they start with a subscription, how many of them are renewing subscriptions, right? Referring others is another really good one. We do this a lot for our platform products, actually, because we want for more developers to come and consume our platform. While we have other things which are actually platform-centered, like time to market, total cost of ownership, and stuff that actually helps you improve or validate the value proposition of your platform, one really good thing is adoption. How many people are actually adopting your platform or recommending others to adopt it? And lastly, of course, return on investment. How quickly are you going to see 8x of your investment? This is always something that I remember our Hitachi execs used to always, whenever we would have these P&L sheets, they'd always look at the last square on the Excel sheet. Tell me when I'm going to hit like twice of that. That's always their question. So this talks about acquisition costs, support costs, delivery costs, professional services costs, and how are you going to basically overcome that to become that hockey stick growth curve that you all heard about? How do you get to that? How do you improve a product? Let's take Instagram. Can you guys think of ways to improve the product? It's pretty good, right? Same thing. Talk about the goal. Let's say it's connecting people, right? Now, what is the criteria for this metric? It could be that it's connecting a lot of people in the United States, but not connecting enough people in India, right? That's an area to improve your product. Now you think about what are the problems that exist in that, to achieve that goal. The user base is not growing. That's a clear way to indicate that people in India are not using it. Revenue is not growing. People are using it, but nobody's actually converting. So the ads are not working. So that means you need to do better targeting of those ads, right? Do we need higher engagement? That is, people have signed up, but nobody's actually logging back in. That means the content that you're putting out there is not relevant enough, right? You can talk about click-through rates, and I think I forgot to complete that statement, but anyway. The next thing you think about is competition. So whenever you're answering these questions, always bring into picture what is the competition. These are just structures that I've put out, to be honest. Just use these structures to practice through some of your interview questions. It just becomes a part of your mindset. So when you're solving this, talk about who's your competition, right? Maybe there's another Instagram, there's a local, and it's so true of China, for example. They have their own social media channels. And that's why some of our social media platforms are not successful there, because there's an existing competition that has higher market share. What are they doing better? Where's the gap? That gets you to your solutioning and the areas that you can actually focus on improving, right? And don't forget, whenever you're talking about an existing product, think about how you're going to roll this out. Especially if it's a cloud-based product, it's probably easier. But if it's actually something that needs to be installed on-prem, think about what your delivery plan needs to be, what your professional services costs need to be. Think about it if you're in that space. Lastly, how do you test the success? You can see all of these are related. And the reason I have some of these questions which all sound different, but they all are actually talking about the exact same thing. It's the same structure. And you'll hear various permutations and combinations of these questions when you go to your interviews. Don't think that they have different answers. Every interviewer is looking for this exact step-by-step thinking of keeping it consistent, keeping it succinct, and getting to goals, users, problems, solution. Talk about the metrics. Talk about doing usability or A/B testing. Talk about feedback. We talked about learn. Learn not just through data. Once you've learned that your hypothesis was wrong, was right, whatever it is, go back and validate. Talk to those customers again, do mock-ups, whatever it takes, right, to actually understand if this is really working for them. Think about support metrics as well, because many of these organizations have significant investment to grow their global ops teams, and they're not sure how to tie their support investments back with their their product growth costs. So the product development costs. Throw in some tools that you guys have played around with. This is great because if you actually have some hands-on experience with using analytical tools and you have it doesn't have to be that you've changed the face of Facebook. It could be something as simple as what I did, right? Just play around with it. it will really take you a long way and it'll actually have some authenticity when you're actually talking about this. Logging. This is really important. Logging comes hands in hand, is close to sort of what I meant with instrumentation. Logging is where you can log the values of your different counters, things like how many error messages showed up, how many times was this AJAX call taking place, all of these things, right? This will help you a lot in testing how successful your launch was. And that is all.